Hey everybody, how y'all doing tonight? Who here is interested in figuring out how to make music? Oh, we got quite a few people. Who here has already started making their own music and is interested in how to make it better? Wow, you guys have a lot of pressure tonight.
All right, let's get started.
Let's get it started in here.
All right, let's do the introductions.
All right, quick introductions. I am Sharek Darksword Ansari, remixer, judge, and staff member at OC Remix. With me on the panel tonight, I have Nabil Neblix Ansari. He's a remixer, also an employee at Impact Soundworks, sample company. We also have Andrew Zircon Aversa, and he is one of the founders of Impact Soundworks sample company and a remixer on OC Remix, judge, staff member, etc. He's focused on he's getting all set up. And last but certainly not least, Mr. David DJ Pretzel Lloyd.
I hate that expression because it means that someone was least.
Yeah, that was.
Who was least?
Steve-O.
Steve-O was least.
Because he's not even up here.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, so the mixing panel. So the way this is going to work. Yeah, can we, Nabil? Can you get?
Oh yeah, let's get video.
Plug it in?
Yeah, it's plugged in.
Do you want to do
Duplicate?
I don't know.
We're going to do Q&A as well.
I don't know.
The projectors. That's how the panel works.
All right.
Is the projectors aren't even on? Where is like panel ops, man?
Where's our
all right.
guys?
Yeah, there's not one.
There's like
person
no
from
one
MAGFest
from
in here.
MAGFest here to.
Steve is going to press the buttons. He's going to make it work.
Somebody introduce me because I'm doing this.
Steve-O, level 99 boards. I waited till he get to the other one. Okay, good.
That's good.
All
That's
right.
impressive.
They gave me lemon.
Wonderful.
Wow, that was a nice visual pun.
Hey. All right. Lemon, here it comes.
Okay.
Oh. All right. So,
Life gives you lemons, throw them.
how to make a remix? How do we make remixes? Okay, so the way this panel is going to work is we are going to we have a selection of 3 source tunes that we're going to have you guys pick from, applause meter style, and then we're going to have a selection of 3 styles that we're going to do the remix in. You're going to do it applause meter style. So, Andy,
We're gonna play them first.
we're going to play them first.
Play the source tunes.
Play the source tunes
Of
first.
it.
Okay. Yeah, everybody? Okay, cool.
This might be loud.
Can we dim the lights, Steve-O? Make
Possible.
it like romantic?
All right, possible.
All right, the
program,
first
Steve-O.
source tune.
There's like no bass at all.
Yeah.
All right, Kirby, classic, right?
That would be green, green.
So
Green
green
Greens.
greens. That's the first one. Then we'll do an applause test after. So we got that.
Greens are usually green. Just-
There's no bass, so you can barely get this.
Yeah,
Super Metroid.
Super Metroid.
Lower brimstone.
All right, so we got that.
All right, y'all know that song.
be
And
choice
then
B.
from Final Fantasy VII, Tifa's theme. Ooh. Well, this is like the arranged
ahead,
version.
skip ahead, skip ahead.
Whatever.
Skip to the
Go to
good
like
stuff.
here, there, yeah. Yeah, all right, y'all know. Yeah, all right, okay. So, applause meter style. Okay, don't applause for more than one. Some of y'all like to do that. Don't do it. All right.
do it.
So,
Just don't.
first up, make some noise for Green Greens.
That's Kirby.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. Fair amount of people. Let's hear it. Let's hear it for Lower Brinstar.
Oh, hey.
Okay. All right. All right.
Definitely in the lead.
Anyone in the house want to hear some Tifa's theme?
Definitely narrowed it down to the last 2. Green Greens
All right.
is out.
All right. Green Greens. No Green Greens tonight. So let's try it again. All right. So if you voted for Green Greens, this is the time to make your vote count.
Yep.
All right?
Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders, feel the burn. Let's hear it for Lower Brinstar. And who wants to hear Tifa's theme?
I think that's Tifa's theme.
I think it's louder for Tifa's theme, but there's more people for Lower Brinstar.
I think
just
it's
hedging.
Super Metroid by a hair.
I think it's Super Metroid. No. We've tried that before.
No mashup.
Nope. Yeah, it's definitely like a very loud contingent sitting on that side, and we certainly appreciate your enthusiasm, but we're gonna go with Metroid tonight. All right. Okay.
It's okay. It's good.
Now, what are the three? What? All right. So
Everybody
what
wins.
are the styles we're doing? Nabil, why don't you tell us the styles that we have?
So our first choice is EDM, electronic dance music. So
Okay. Well,
Oh,
no,
it's-
nothing yet. And then what's the next one?
the second one is jazz, any variety of jazz.
Okay. What's the third one?
The third one is piano waltz.
Piano
Oh,
waltz.
God. You didn't tell me that before.
Piano waltz.
Okay,
All
I
right.
can
So
do it.
so again, applause meter style, EDM.
It's good.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Some people.
It's good. Respectable.
Jazz. A lot of jazz. All right. And who wants to hit the dance floor with some piano waltz?
I think jazz has.
I think jazz is the winner.
I think it's jazz.
Jazz
right?
is always
Jazz
a big hit.
Metroids.
Jazz
Jazz
Metroid.
Metroids.
We have until 8:30.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So Andy and Nabil, you guys, are you gonna work on this, Nabil? Are you gonna talk? All right. So Andy and Nabil are gonna get started on working on a jazz remix for Super Metroid Lower Brinstar, and what we're gonna do, me and Dave, and then Steve-O
And
will
Steve-O.
also Steve-O as well.
forget him. Thank you.
We're gonna basically open this up to you guys. This is
Yes.
how we always do the panel. We'll open up to you guys, and we will ask you guys to ask us questions. So if you have questions, you can come up here and ask some questions about what you want to do. Also, real quick, if you want to buy some OC Remix merch and help support the site, Jarell is in the back. Wave to Jarell. Everybody wave to Jarell. Jarell's waving to you. Hey. So Jarell's our merch man. Jarell's got some merch in the back, T-shirts, etc. Some albums and stuff. So you guys can rock that. So you can get up at any time and go buy something. We're not going to stop you from giving us money. So let's get things started. Any questions about how to make a remix?
Let me
What?
give the intro
Oh.
to how we're setting this up.
Okay. Oh yeah. All right.
So what we're going to do to set up the remix here, we're using FL Studio, which some of you might be familiar with already. It's pretty popular software.
It is what you would call a DAW, or digital audio workstation.
No.
They don't call it that anymore, but yes, Fruity Loops.
I call it that.
And what we have within Fruity Loops using today is a plugin called Contact. There's a free version of this called Contact Player. So even though the specific sounds we're using here aren't necessarily free, you can get things in this. You can get drum sets, you can get pianos, basses that are going to sound pretty good and better than sound fonts. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah. That's
They are
fine.
better, and so that's free. So FL, you can get a demo for free if you're starting from scratch, and then you can get Contact Player for free, and you can start using sounds. So I'm loading up sounds now, and I'm going to start probably by listening to the source a little bit on headphones, and start working on some rhythm and chords. So
So-
I'm going to jump into that now.
Who here doesn't know what a DAW is? Raise your hand. All right.
Actually, let's do a quick survey. Who here already makes music?
I think we already did this.
No, we didn't. And not in this panel, we didn't do. All right, so fair number.
Like 2 minutes ago.
Who here like plays an instrument but doesn't know how to like record and do a lot of like computer stuff and is interested in that kind of thing?
Good variety.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, okay. Just getting a pulse of the room. here. Okay.
So, Sharik, what's a digital audio workstation?
I don't know.
I'll do it.
Dave can talk about it.
Okay, so digital audio workstation is just a fancy term. You'll sometimes see it as DAW or DAW to refer to the type of program that you would use to make music on a computer. The one you're looking at up on the screen, the one that Andy's using tonight with Nabil, is FL Studio. Happens to be the most popular choice of artists on Overclock Remix.
Contested.
No, it's the most
No,
popular.
It's the most popular.
That doesn't mean it's the best, but it is the most popular.
Okay.
And amazing music has been made with that.
Oh,
as
absolutely.
Andy and Nabil can attest. Monstrous Turtles, need I say more?
Yeah.
Other alternatives that are popular on the site. There's a program called Reason. Propeller has Reason, which is kind of like a self-contained program that comes with a lot of sounds built in. Cubase by Steinberg. Presonus has software called Studio One that I've actually switched to recently. There's a very popular program that's good for sequencing and also good for live performance and DJ sets called Ableton Live. So it's, yeah, there you go.
Oh, there's people who know Ableton.
Well, Ableton is very popular. It's been winning the best DAW award from like Music Technology Magazine, or whatever that's worth.
It's a complicated method of
It's
pressing
on version
play.
9, so it's actually been around a long time. Bitwig, Sonar, sorry?
There's Logic. We heard Sonar.
Logic, yeah, Logic is a Mac-only option, so if you're Windows, then you can't really do that, because Apple bought eMagic a long time ago. And
Yeah, I mean, there's DAWs across the spectrum. There's expensive DAWs like, what's the one that you have to buy hardware for?
Pro Tools.
Pro Tools. You can go from Pro Tools all the way down to Audacity, which is an open source.
Audacity doesn't do MIDI, but there's like...
VST.
Well, there's audio processing.
Yeah,
sure, but it
and
doesn't
there's
do MIDI.
Reaper.
Yeah. Reaper is a very good, free, cheap, not free, very cheap, like $30 or something.
60.
60, okay. Good option.
Yeah.
I guess the important thing is not necessarily which program you choose, but that they all have free demos that you can download and check them out and just see which one works for you. There's something to be said for the fact that a lot of people find FL Studio to be a relatively intuitive option. It is a little bit different from all the other options. Studio One, Cubase, Sonar all sort of work a similar way to Pro Tools. Did I just get louder? I feel like I just got louder.
I bumped your volume.
Steve-O, you made me louder. So yeah, it's less about which, just like there are console fanboys who will tell you that the Xbox is better than the PlayStation 4, even though it isn't. Sorry. There are actually DAW fanboys and fangirls who will tell you that one program is better than another, but to be honest, you can make amazing music from anything that's free to $800, and it's a better time to be making music now with a computer than it has been ever in the past. So it's less about which DAW you choose and more about how well you learn it, I would say.
You can do projects in so many different ways that it really depends on how you work with audio, that your workflow corresponds to the audio workstation that you end up using. And most of these have free demos or like unlimited or limited trial versions that you can use.
It's probably worth pointing out that nowadays a lot of people have, well, almost everyone on Earth now has a smartphone and tablets and things of that nature. And there are actually DAWs for smartphones and tablets, but they are a little bit more limited.
True.
And to me, like if I was just getting started making music, I wouldn't necessarily take the time to learn a DAW that was mobile first. I would probably focus on a desktop DAW just because the world of plugins opens up to you. So most DAWs support something called plugins, where you can have different types of synthesizers, different types of samples, different types of effects, and they're, you buy them and then, or download them, some of them are free, and then you add them in. With mobile DAWs, there's usually less of that. There's no support for something called VST, for example.
Right. Before we get into that, I want to have Shark go over, there's multiple methods for making sounds within an audio workstation itself. You can have synthesis, samples, or raw audio. Shark, what's the difference between those three?
Why are you asking me? No. All right. We don't want to get too technical here, so I'm just going to give a very high-level explanation.
It's fine.
Synthesis is your DAW is actually generating the sounds using math.
Yeah.
Math formulas.
That's a good way to put it.
And samples are actual recordings of sounds. Someone sat down and put a microphone up to a trumpet, recorded a whole bunch of notes, and then map that to some kind of software package, which is used, be it a sample library or a sound font or something, or even just WAV files loaded up in your DAW, drum loops, whatever you have. And those are that's the difference between samples and synthesis. So there's lots of different types of synthesis, and that's a whole FM. There's subtractive, all this stuff. There's so many different types of things. We're not going to get too deep into that stuff.
Right.
We don't want to get too technical here, but
I'm just explaining what he's doing is he's using samples, pre-recorded wave files, like sounds, that are sequenced via MIDI data in order to generate the sounds that you're going to hear tonight.
And you can think of MIDI data as essentially a fancy term for note data.
Yeah. If you've ever looked at a staff chart, MIDI data is an amalgamation of staff chart data with velocity,
You're getting pretty technical here.
Oh.
Okay, so real quick. What's MIDI? MIDI is just instructions for your computer telling it what sounds to play, how loud to play them, how fast to play them, all of these different things. It's like sheet music for your computer. That's basically what it boils down to. It's a standard. It's been around for a long time, and that's what these applications use to basically put together, tell your DAW what notes to play, what samples to play, all of these different things.
Yeah.
So let's open this up to the audience. I want to open this up to you guys because this is how I want to do the panel. If you guys have any questions, if you're like an amateur musician and you're trying to get into this stuff, what do you want to know? Go ahead. Anyway, if you have a question, just raise your hand. You can come up to the podium if you want and ask at the. Don't be shy. We're all here to learn.
I think technical questions are fine.
Technical questions are
you.
fine, but also there are no dumb questions. So if you have something and you're afraid of asking because you think everyone already knows,
Are there any dumb questions?
There are no dumb questions.
I don't get your shirt, but I love it.
All right.
The missing link. It says the missing link in really small text.
All right.
So, you went over a lot of the software, but like, what about hardware stuff? Like,
Sure.
Right.
what kind of like hardware is like very important, like especially for beginners?
Okay. Well, I would say if you're making music digitally, you probably want a good computer, good processor, lots of memory.
Right.
That's the most basic way of saying it. You want a powerful machine that's going to be able to
I
handle.
think 16 gigs is a standard for making music right now.
Yeah, you want at least 16 gigs of memory on your
The
computer.
laptop we're using right now has 16 gigs of RAM on it. So
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, most people already have a computer, and it's probably powerful enough to do some amount of music making. The one question would be how you want to get the music into the computer.
Yeah. So
How does it get in there?
How do you get it in there?
There's also a lot of things called audio interfaces, which is kind of like it's like a sound card that sits outside of your computer. You hook it up using USB, and then it basically does a lot of the audio processing for you. And a good audio interface is going to have some inputs for microphones, for auxiliary inputs.
One of the nice things about MacBooks, and I'm actually a Windows guy, but one of the nice things about MacBooks is that the OS X audio drivers just built into the laptop are fast enough that you don't even necessarily need a separate audio interface. You can make music with pretty good response times without even buying a sound card, but that's just an FYI. It's not necessarily a given.
So what we're looking at here is you want to have a computer that can handle in RAM all of the samples that you would want to load in. You want to have a processor fast enough to be able to process those samples plus the effects you'd be layering. And you want an audio interface that is going to be fast enough at the driver level to handle everything you're throwing at it. Is that right?
And critically, the last component, I think, in terms of when I think of getting music into the computer, I think of an actual MIDI controller, which, if you could hold, Andy, can you hold up the keyboard real quick?
Right.
So this is a very tiny and...
How many people here play piano?
Okay. It helps.
Yeah.
Piano is, apologies to guitar players, but piano is like the de facto way of scoring and arranging music on a computer just because it has an octave coverage that can handle pretty much any instrument out there, including the piano. I mean, you can have an 88-key MIDI controller that covers the full range of the piano.
It's a great way to figure out your voicing for different parts that you're writing. You have your bass line, you have your chords, you have your melody, counter melodies. All of these things you can kind of plink out on a piano.
Yeah.
I don't know how to play keyboard. I don't know how to play piano. I actually don't really use a MIDI controller.
Mouse enters.
I put everything in to FL Studio using my mouse.
Right.
So you don't need it. Dave said it's critical. It is critical for a lot of people, but if you can get around it, some people are more comfortable just sequencing. And
it depends on the genre of music you're doing. It would be very masochistic to do mouse entering on a very humanized jazz piano.
Yeah, and I've tried it before, and it's not. It
can
it's
be
a lot
done,
of work.
but
It's too much work.
You can do it, but it's going to take you months.
Yeah.
Right. So this kind of brings me to something else. We're talking a lot about hardware, software, and what programs do I need? What hardware do I need? You also need there's a crucial third component, which is you actually need some knowledge of music.
It helps.
It really helps. It really helps if you understand scales, if you understand chords. Not anything crazy. I'm not asking you to go to college and learn music theory.
I mean, the only reason I shake my head is because like Danny Elfman, composer of like Batman, Beetlejuice, whatever, a lot of tons of stuff, famously said that he mostly goes by ear and doesn't think in theory.
Okay, but
it does depend on who you are.
But he knows how to write music.
Actually, no. Originally he hired orchestrators to score things for him. But I mean,
Okay, well, if you want to be like Danny Elfman, you can hire an orchestrator to write your music for you.
I have a question for the audience. How many of you have taken like a basic music class in high school or in middle school or something like
Yeah,
that?
were you like in
Yeah.
band or anything in high school? Anyone?
Band helps.
Yeah.
Like any of
ability
that
to read sheet
experience,
music helps.
Like
Yeah.
a bottom line experience is enough for you to start having a handle on
So
how to
basically,
make music.
this is what I'm going to recommend. What you want to know is, understand what a scale is, understand what intervals are between notes, understand what chords are. Okay, nothing crazy.
Yeah.
Also, you want to have a general understanding of meter, which is like rhythm and time signatures. Nothing crazy. Just know what 4/4 time means, know what 3/4 time means, that kind of stuff. Okay, you can learn all of this stuff online. You can find some books to do it. You can take a class. How many
yeah.
people are still in school here? College
There's
age,
also-
high school age?
What is it? Andy mentioned Linda
Stay in
earlier.
school.
Yeah, lynda.com.
LYNDA.
Yeah.
Online tutorials for how
Online
to make
tutorials.
music.
There's a lot of stuff you can learn.
Go ahead.
So I would recommend having a basic knowledge of music when you're going to be
Alright.
writing. When you're going to write music, you got to know what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to be lost, and you're not going to know what any of this stuff means when you're trying to enter notes.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'll hear people say, "Oh, just like going to the program and start playing around," which is okay, but it's better when you have kind of an idea of what you're trying to do.
You can do things to a certain extent intuitively. Music theory is never going to hurt you. It's only going to help.
You're going to
So
see fights like this all night, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just talking about how I learned to do things, and even though I was in band and can read sheet music to a certain extent, I do things mostly by ear and by sight, which is not necessarily how most people are going to work. But I don't want to discount it.
Right.
To me, what I would add to what Sharik is saying, which I think it's absolutely, if you don't know the difference between 4/4 and 3/4, you might have some troubles writing a waltz.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough, right? But to me, the most important thing you can do if you're going to start writing music is to start listening to music critically.
Yes. Right.
And what I mean by that
Very
is
good.
you can listen to music to enjoy it, and by all means you should. Hopefully it's fun. That's kind of the point. But if you start when you're listening to music, decomposing it in your head and start listening to just the drum part, or like just listen to the bass part for a song, or just the lyrics. I guess some people do that. That's more common. But when you're listening to music, it doesn't matter what it is, video game music, Kanye, whatever. And you start listening and focusing on just the hi-hats, just the chords, yeah, just the snare drum, and try to think about how it's all layered. Because the way that you work with a digital audio workstation, you don't necessarily have to play an instrument very well, but what you do have to be able to do is layer parts. I would say like songwriting, arranging,
Okay.
composing is layering parts.
All right, now we're falling down the rabbit hole. Can we get to the next question?
Yeah, let's go to the next question. We'll get back to listening critically.
Dave, I love it. I agree with you. I just want to make sure we get through everybody.
Hey, I'm autodidact, so that's how I do it.
Hi, this is somewhat a little bit off topic, but you were talking about how Audacity is, you wouldn't really consider it as something that you'd perform one of your workflows on, right? So, I mean, I'm a developer, and I'm always looking to contribute to open source, and I'm wondering, since you say Audacity is such a limited tool, what kinds of plugins that you would think
Well,
for
okay,
Audacity
so here's the
they
thing.
would
The
be.
biggest issue with Audacity, which is why we wouldn't recommend it as a DAW for this crowd, is there's no MIDI support.
Yes.
You can't play music you can't use a MIDI controller, load up samples, and play music into it. You just can't.
Yes.
LMEE, the Linux multimedia software.
Rose Garden still?
Yeah.
Yeah. There are Linux open source DAWs that will support both audio and MIDI. The reason that we singled Audacity out as not being sufficient is because it's only good for recording multi-track audio.
Yeah.
You can't compose
If
notes.
you're the kind of person who is sitting down with your guitar and your bass player and your drummer and all this stuff, and you're playing everything, Audacity's fine. It's great because you can load up VST effects and everything and do that. And you can mix and master using Audacity. It's a pretty powerful program in that regard. But for what we're talking about here, most DAWs are going to allow you to not only manipulate recorded audio, but also samples, have a synthesis engine where you can write MIDI and all this other stuff. So that's really why that's
And
the
I guess there
distinction.
are no plugins for that at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a core, it's like, it has to be built into the core functionality
It's
of the application.
it's baseline functionality.
It's a
Yeah,
functionality
right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, well, thank
Thanks.
you.
Going on the subject of Linux, I use Linux as my daily OS. I was wondering, what are some good DAWs for Linux?
I can hopefully address this. We've already mentioned one, which is Rose Garden, which is open source and free, and you can get it, and it's good. Steve-O, you mentioned...
LMME, Linux Multimedia Editor.
Does Reaper have a Linux port?
Reaper does not have a Linux
No.
port. If
Okay.
you use Linux, you can use Wine, which is, this is not a Windows
Well,
emulator.
that's kinda cheating.
Well, no, but the thing is, Reaper has somewhat official support
For Wine? Okay.
on Linux. The problem is, most of the DAWs are made for Windows or Mac.
True.
And unless you are running something native, which it's mostly open source tools on Linux, you're going to have to emulate it using Wine.
There's one exception, and it's a great exception. I could talk about it for a long time, but Shark wouldn't let me.
Of
And that
course.
is Bitwig Studio, which is a relatively new DAW. And to me, it's fascinating because as a programmer, it's actually, the core of it is written in Java, which is very rare. None of the other DAWs are written in
Oh,
Java.
wow. How many crashes am I going to get running that?
None. Plugins are sandboxed. It's fantastic.
What?
Yeah, it's great.
Oh boy, guys.
Okay. So if I were on Linux and I were like hardcore Linux, I never want to see, touch, or do anything with Windows or OS X, I'd be looking into Bitwig, to be honest. It is commercial. I think you can buy it for, it's not cheap. The full version is like $300. I think there's a cheaper version that you can get. The downside of Linux DAWs is really this. Even if it's a good DAW and it runs 100% fine on Linux, there's limited plugin support.
Yeah.
And so people don't port their plugins, like Contact, for example, that Andy's using now and is sort of like the de facto sample library. No Linux support. So that's really where it's going to hit you. But if you're dead set in your ways, that's all cool. I would check out Bitwig. It's very functional. It's very stable. It's actually technologically very interesting that it's written in Java, but it's also very fast. So.
All right.
Okay.
Wow.
Before we
Dave,
go to
that's awesome.
before we go to the next question, oh, that was really good actually, Dave. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to.
I'm going to have to check that out.
Before we go to the next question, let's check. Can we check in with Andy and Nabil? Let's do one more question and then we'll check in with you guys.
All right.
All right.
Hey, I was wondering if you guys are going to go over some of the mixing process, just like maybe something quick or something, like when you do it at the end, especially with an arrangement with when there's like a lot of tracks, you know, it's kind of confusing like where you put everything, get them sounding their best and not
Okay.
cloud it up.
So EQ.
You're talking about EQ, busing, mastering, that kind of stuff.
Or are you talking more about part writing from a composition standpoint?
That could be it, but mostly just like a quick mix at the end, like once we go over, I guess the arrangement.
Yeah, we're going to check in with these guys and see what they're doing in a second.
We could quickly try to cover some core principles.
We should say that till after we hear what he's done, though.
Yeah.
So we will definitely get to that, though.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
is
no
he ready?
problem.
No, I think they're still doing stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, they're still doing
Let's
stuff.
go to the next.
Next question. That's a great wig.
Hi, I'm an arranger for the Gamer Symphony Orchestra, and
Oh,
I
cool.
use
Awesome.
I use Sibelius.
Yeah.
What are the advantages or differences between using a notation software like Sibelius versus FL Studio?
Okay, so here's the thing. Notation software, a lot of notation software like Sibelius has support for using, Contact or some sample engines in order to provide you with a pretty good mock-up of what you're going to have. But notation software is really designed for creating sheet music for live players. Okay, so I would recommend not using something like Sibelius as a DAW because you're not really going to get
Audio editing.
Audio editing. You're not really going to get lots of plugin support for like mixing and mastering and adding effects and sort of the kind of technical stuff that goes into actual music production. So the difference is, so Sibelius and Finale and those kinds of applications. Notation software. Those are really they're notation software. That's what they are. They're not for production. They're not for creating production. Because see, what you're doing when you're using a program like FL Studio or Pro Tools or something, you are creating a performance. That's what you're doing. So whether you're performing on your guitar or your piano or something and recording that into your DAW, or you're sitting there with the mouse and writing out notes and adjusting velocities and all these other things, you are creating a performance. With notation software, what you're doing is you're creating something that's going to be performed. Does that make sense?
Here's a good example. Like for one of the Nights into Dreams project songs, it was written entirely in Sibelius, and no matter what the arranger was doing, they couldn't get the final mix to sound on par with stuff that people were using, like East-West Quantum Leap, and using a mastering software and an actual DAW versus the notation software. So if you're doing it for a live performance, or if you're doing it just to mock up something for like an assignment, notation software is vastly superior from a technical musical aspect than any DAW you could ever work in. But if you're doing something to have an end result, a final mix, something you're going to put on an album or put online, you're going to need to export all of that sheet music into MIDI data and import it into something that will be able to route the audio in a much better method than Sibelius or Finale.
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, Sibelius makes it relatively easy to export to a DAW, I think. So if you use it in conjunction with a DAW, you can get there, but then your process is a little convoluted because you're starting in one program and you're finishing in another, and it's generally preferable to be able to work in a single package. But the other thing I would just say is, like, if you're writing EDM or something, Sibelius would kind of feel just like wrong.
So what you do is you write your EDM in Sibelius, and you print it all out, and you give it to your orchestra.
We're ready to check in now.
Right.
All right, let's check in with Andy and Nabil.
All right, where we're at. So this is Metroid
Also,
Jazz,
keep up the
right?
great work.
Super Metroid Jazz.
Let's see how the audio is.
Just use the microphone to talk if you're going to talk.
Really abusing that ride cymbal.
That's what we have right now. Laying
It's an
down
underpinning, yeah.
All right.
Good intro.
So what did you do? How did you write that?
Well, Nabil was thinking like a Latin sort of flair to it for the drums.
Yeah,
right?
I was thinking like I mean, did any of you go see Disco Cactus earlier?
Yes.
I was actually thinking a lot about their music, and I like their grooves a lot, so I was thinking kind of like a Latin kind of straight time jazzy, accompaniment, kind of like what they do for a lot of their arrangements. So I was thinking to do a similar thing for this. So I laid down a rhythm in the drums, and then gave like a little piano pattern, and then I showed it to Andy, and then Andy started riffing on it.
Pattern by itself.
Yeah, so this is what Nabil had. So I want to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was doing was getting an intro sort of based on that pattern. So putting down the chords and the guitar. And the sound system here is really bad. It's basically cutting off everything below like 500
Yeah, we're not getting any
hertz,
bass
so-
from these speakers.
There's no, I tried. There's no way to get any more
there's
bass.
nothing we can do about it.
No bass
So-
at MAGFest.
So there's the guitar is playing, the sort of the two chords going back and forth from the source. There's a drum pattern which is starting kind of simple with the hi-hat or the ride cymbal, and then it's becoming a little bit more complex. And then there's a piano. It's sort of like vaguely Latin-esque pattern. They call it like a montuno, where it's sort of like a repetitive piano pattern.
Very syncopated.
Yeah, it's syncopated, right. And then we bring in the bass here on measure 9. So we're going to keep building on this, adding variations, getting the melody in probably next in the next bar, and also changing up the drums.
So I have a question, and I already know the answer to it, but I'm asking on behalf of the audience. This doesn't sound like Metroid. I mean, it doesn't sound like the song that we
Not
listened
yet.
to before.
Right, that's because
what, you changed it.
What did you do?
What did you do?
We expressed ourselves.
You ruined it.
I remixed it.
Oh.
I OC remixed it.
He OC remixed it. Okay.
OC Remix 2016.
So 20. Oh, some people from the panel. Some people from the panel earlier, right? All right, cool. So we know that in Lower Brinstar we have that bum 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 bum.
Let's play Lower Brinstar again.
Yeah,
here.
bum 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 bum. Right?
We haven't hit the main melody yet.
No, we
Yeah.
haven't.
we
hit the
haven't.
melody,
Right.
but
We've
that'll
heard
help.
a modulation
right.
of the bass
But
line.
what I'm saying is that because I've remixed that song before myself, and that part is a really kind of like iconic version, that's like iconic of that theme, that bum 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 bum. So you guys did something cool in the bass line here, where it kind of like goes up a little bit.
I just want to make sure
So it's based on it, right? So it's kind of like it's hinting at that melody. So it's a riff on that melody, but then we're going to bring in the actual melody.
Yeah.
But that's just sort of like to give you a preview of it.
If
along
you
with
cut
the
off
story.
most
do you
of
guys,
the channels,
do you
from-
guys kind of hear the similarity of what's happening here with what they're doing? Yeah.
Right. So basically, what the bass line is if you cut off every other sound from the source, it would be a very similar chord structure to what he's playing on the double bass.
Exactly. All right. So you guys gonna get back to work?
Let me do one other thing.
One other thing.
No, I'm going to do something.
Oh, okay.
Well, do we want to just talk about briefly what's up on the screen?
Right.
In terms of the track data and the MIDI data and everything.
Right,
So, as you move from left to right, that's time as the song progresses. If this
That's
isn't,
time.
that's time progressing in the song. Yeah,
Time
I mean
is
it's hopefully a little intuitive.
Wait,
Yeah, it's
hang
like
on.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Real
That's
quick.
time.
Real quick. Is anyone confused
Space.
about like what's happening on the screen? Anyone?
That's what we're talking
We got a
about.
couple.
She is. Those lines at the bottom.
Those lines at the bottom.
Okay.
Velocities.
Yes.
The lines at the bottom indicate the velocity of the note. Okay, so the velocity of the note is
How hard you hit the key.
how hard you hit the key, basically. So velocity is how hard you hit the key. Volume is how far away you are from the piano. Does that make sense? That's kind of a good way of thinking of it. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the other thing with velocity is with a lot of these samples that we're using, the tone changes too. So here in this bass, that note sounds just like a bass. Normally it's an upright bass, but if I turn up the velocity, you get like a click from
gotta-
the strings being.
Yeah.
You get a tap.
It's emulating the physical properties of the instrument.
It's not emulating anything, actually.
It's recorded.
Because it's
Oh,
a sample, so
shut
it's just a
down.
recording.
Tomato, tomato.
It's not physical
Potato,
modeling.
potato.
Nobody
No.
says
No.
tomato.
I haven't met one person who said
Never
tomato.
heard anyone say tomato before. All right. So, Andy and Nabil are going to get back to work, and we can take the next question.
Yes.
Hey, so I have FL Studios. I'm not too good at it yet. I think the problem I have is that I have like music in my head, but I have a hard time finding, I guess, the sample or whatever
The sound
I want
you
on
want,
FL
yeah.
Studios. So I guess what's a good way to transfer the music in your head onto the computer?
Okay, so first thing, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, that in essence is once you figure that out, everything else is
Profit.
pretty easy.
Yeah,
Jose, why don't you?
Well, something that comes from practice is the more music you do, the more there's a set of go-to sounds that you might have on you.
Yeah.
People like me who worked in MIDI since 2000 will be more comfortable with default MIDI sounds, or at least a regular like the basic sound font I use to come with creative cards, where to get your ideas down first.
Yeah.
If you're familiar, the more familiar you are with the sounds you have in your studio, the more you can go back to them. As soon as you have an idea, you can put it down using those sounds, and then worry about much later. Once if you get a full arrangement, or even if not, but somewhere during the development of the song, you can then worry about like something much better. Better sounds can come.
There's definitely an approach that would be essentially forget how you want it to sound exactly and just go for an approximation, get it close
Exactly.
enough, focus on the notes, focus on the structure, and then after the fact, fill in the specific sounds by like going through your library of sounds and,
Right,
and
and it
you know,
helps
trying
to do
different
that
things out.
before you lose that idea. You don't want to lose that germ of an idea.
But I would probably say that if you're interested in being prolific and getting a lot of work done, that's probably the better way to do things.
Right.
Some people start the reverse way, whereas like they have one piece of the arrangement, like maybe just the melody part in their mind, and they'll spend 5 hours finding the right sound for it.
I've done that too.
And then everything else falls into place. So I don't think there's one right way to do it. Even for one artist, it might depend on the song.
No,
but those are
agreed,
two good approaches.
Yeah.
But once you ought to find a good workflow for yourself.
Yeah. No, basically, if you have a whole arrangement in your head, get it all out and don't worry about the sound until later. Because with sequencing MIDI data, unless you're doing raw recordings, you can always change how it sounds.
It's true. I mean, sometimes you'll run into gotchas where like the arrangement, the success of the arrangement hinges on a specific sound, and if you can't find that sound, you're screwed. I mean, that's happened to me before, but usually that's not the case. So I tend to agree.
So
That's
what I would say to you is, you know, don't worry about. I mean, we talked a little bit about it, and they dinged me a little bit on it because we talked about like having, you know, we're using Contact here and all this stuff. I used free sound fonts for a long time. Okay?
it's a great effect.
A long time I used. I mean, nowadays I have Contact and I use like, you know, really nice samples and stuff. But I used free stuff from the internet for a really long time. A lot of my songs on OC Remix are made with free sound fonts.
Right.
And sound good.
And they sound great.
They sound pretty good. They could sound better if I use better samples, but they sound pretty good.
Oh, everybody loves the dark sax.
Right.
I think Yellow Valkyrie is my favorite mix from you.
Right, and and that mix is all just free sound fonts. So what I would say is start collecting a lot of sounds and just experimenting. And this is where experimenting really works, because sometimes what I'll do is I'll just load up FL Studio, I'll start picking some samples, and I'll start seeing what these samples are capable of.
Yeah.
And then you have a better understanding of your personal sound library. And then you can start saying, well, okay, I know I can do this with that bass sample. I can get like a really cool kind of upright sound with that bass sample. So let me go and try to write this track, and I know I can do this because I know I have these samples.
Yeah, sometimes the arrangement starts with a good sound.
Don't you have a website that has free samples?
I
that
do.
You're a
I
fan
have
of?
a website called soundfonts.darksword.com. It hasn't been updated in like 10 years, but there's a whole bunch of sound fonts on there that I like to use. So hit that up, grab it. It's good for mocking stuff up. I have a lot of nice, expensive sample libraries, and I still go back to using some sound fonts because I'm comfortable with those sounds.
Right.
My music nowadays is a mix of old free sound fonts that I used to use and new, nice sound libraries that I have paid a lot of money for.
All right, no, thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks. That was a good question.
Great question. Next.
Yokai Watch.
Yokai.
All right, yeah.
I love it. All right.
Okay, I remix a lot of music. I am pretty proficient in Family Tracker, and I wanted to get into FL Studio or other DAWs. And since I already do a lot of synthesis, I wanted to try to get more into samples in raw audio. So I wanted to know what would be the best hardware for recording different instruments, and what software would be good for that.
That's a tricky question.
Well, like for building your own samples?
Yeah.
Basically? I mean, Contact is pretty good
Well,
for that.
hang on a sec. Andy, we got a question about how you record your own samples. Now, you own a company that does that.
That's true.
Can you talk about that just a little bit, real quick? We don't want to get too deep into it, but...
Yeah, without getting too deep, getting a matched pair of like condenser mics is where I would start. Something like MXL, they sell sets, like one large diaphragm, which is good for like stuff where you want to capture a lot of body, and then they have small diaphragms. So it's like it looks like one fat mic and one sort of like pencil mic. That's what they call it sometimes. So you can get those in a set, and they start at maybe like $80 to $100. And with just using those two, you can record a lot of instruments. So if you have that, and then if you have like a simple audio interface, probably on the order of like $100, $150. There's a lot of brands like M Audio, Edirol. Sapphire is another one. Anything that has two mic inputs, if you just have those two things, that's really all the hardware you need for it. The tricky thing is the environment you're recording in. So most people don't have a professional studio to record in. So for example, recording in a closet, because it's very dampened. This goes if you're recording any instrument, like even if you're just playing it, not so much sampling it, but just playing any instrument and trying to get a good recording of it. So closets are good. If you have a bedroom, close the door, like take the mattress off the bed, or like put comforters or sheets up kind of wherever you can, on the walls or on the door. It sounds ridiculous, but it's like, I'm talking about like cheap solutions to get good acoustics in the room. That's almost more important than the mics themselves. So I'd say, you know, with like a matched pair of mics, kind of like an interface that has two preamps, and then just a little bit of treatment around the room, and then any recording software, that's where I would start. I'd be happy to talk more about it too after.
All right. Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Did that answer your question, hopefully?
Yeah, you good?
All right, great.
All right,
Thanks,
fantastic.
man.
That's an awesome Venom hat.
Thank you. I bought a Deathstroke to you yesterday. I have a question. I haven't been making music in like many years, but I've just recently bought a high-powered gaming PC. I
Mhm.
want to get back into making music. Well, I really need a sound card because I use like a piano and a guitar to make music.
Right. Would you need a sound card? You bought a high-end gaming PC. You're trying to get back into writing music. You're asking if you need a sound card. Dave?
Well, okay.
yes and no.
I mean, I would go two directions with that. The first answer, the short answer would just be probably.
Yeah.
Right? But if you want to see what your current sound card is capable of with software like FL Studio or Cubase or Reason or whatever.
Well, I'm familiar with Reasons. I know
Reason, okay.
FL Studio a little bit, but I'm real familiar with Reasons.
Okay. Reason uses ASIO, right? Or does it?
Yeah, well,
yeah. Reason uses ASIO.
So are you using like the integrated sound card in your computer?
Started yet. I was like asking.
Yeah, whatever sound card you currently have, you can see what it's capable of and whether it will suit your needs.
Okay.
There's a free set of drivers called ASIO for All. It's freeware, you can download it. It's ASIO for ALL. And you install that driver and it essentially makes your current sound card as good as it can possibly be. Now that still might not be good enough, but at least you'll know. The driver that your sound card comes with, if it's just a regular gaming PC sound card, is almost certainly not good enough. But there's this free driver. You don't have to change the hardware. You don't have to pay a cent. You can download this ASIO for All software, and you can see just how good it can get. If it's good, then you're good to go. If it's not, then you're probably going to have to buy a sound interface, like a USB interface. You can get those.
They're
new,
not-
yeah,
they're not
they're not
expensive at all.
expensive.
They're not expensive.
You could get one for $80. On eBay, you could get one for probably like $30. You just want to look for something that's more like targeted at professionals for audio recording.
Now, the one thing to say about ASIO for All is that it's mostly for if you're doing internal synthesis. If you're going to be using any of the microphones that Andrew was talking about, most of those use an interface known as XML. Or XLR, that's what it is. XLR cables, which are not compatible without an adapter to most like default sound cards. So if you're going to be recording piano or guitar and you have something that's other than like a headphone jack, either getting an adapter or getting a dedicated audio interface.
I really think the interface is the way to go,
Yeah,
even if
yeah.
you get it
Yeah.
cheap.
Right. Yeah.
It's going to do a lot for you.
Preamps, native. You have a Yeti. Okay, Yeti's pretty good for because I mean that's a USB driver already built in for the blue stuff.
For vocals.
Yeah, for vocals and for recording instruments too. So I mean the blue driver has ASIO. So
There you go.
Yeah. So there, your answer is if you have the blue and you're only going to be recording like instruments or vocals through it, you should be okay.
I would put a little money aside and get a decent audio interface.
They are cheaper than they've ever been. I mean, I remember, I'm kind of old school, so I remember what it was
Back
like
in my day.
15 years ago, where you would spend like $2,000 for an audio interface, and it's just ridiculous.
All right.
Also, can I do one? Okay. Also, Far, you said Contact for like the game sound effects and the sounds.
For sample libraries.
Yeah, for sample libraries.
Yeah, Contact.
Can I use that in Reasons also?
Unfortunately, Reason as a DAW is very unique, and the answer to that question is unfortunately no. Every other DAW, other than Reason, for the most part, supports plugins like called VST. It's a plugin standard, and like almost every DAW supports it except for Reason. I wish OZ Remix has a remixer and ex-judge Matthias Hagstrom-Gert, and he actually works for Propeller Heads who make Reason, and he would be able to defend their decisions, but they've decided essentially to just do their own thing, and they're like, screw plugins.
They have a pretty close sandbox when it comes to like sample and like synthesis stuff.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. Reason's awesome. People make amazing music with it.
Yeah.
But it's just like, well, when you use Reason, that's what you get.
Yeah.
That's essentially what you
Reason
get.
supports rack extensions, but not VST plugins.
Yeah.
Contact is a VST
And
plugin.
VST is kind of like the standard for as
Yeah.
far as audio plugin goes. Yeah.
Yeah, Reason is like the Apple of DAWs,
Yeah,
except
yeah.
that Logic
All right.
is actually Apple's DAW.
All right. Next,
Thank you.
can we go to the next question? We got a lot of
Thank
people
you very
lined up,
much.
and we got
Yeah,
true.
we're all right.
40 minutes left. Marty McFly, what do you got? Hey.
So as a complete beginner who
Okay.
has never touched any sort of FL Studio or anything, like the only thing I've ever touched is like Music Right Plus back in the 90s or
Right,
something like
yeah.
that. When you're starting a remix, like when you choose a song, do you start from like sheet music or do you just listen to the song for like 100 times and play it by
There's a
ear?
couple of different approaches people have. I like to do everything by ear. I feel like doing things by ear helps me understand the music better. So this is going to go back to what Dave was talking about before. He mentioned something really, really important, and I want to emphasize it: listening critically. It's very important to listen critically. What that means is not just listening for your enjoyment, but also deconstructing a song while you're listening to it. What I like to do when I'm driving to work, I have music on, and I listen to like a lot of 80s music and pop stuff, and I have that on. I will sing the bass line to a song. Rather than singing along with the lyrics, I'll sing the bass line. I'll try to pick out the bass line, or I'll listen to like what the piano's doing, and I'll try to sing along with that. So basically, what that helps me do is it helps me separate the parts and figure out how the song is constructed.
Yeah.
So there's all these different voicings and everything. A while ago, I wrote this little essay. I put it up on my website, and then I adapted it later on. I posted it on the forums during one of our competitions that we had. We had a Mega Man remix competition. And I noticed that a lot of people were having trouble with like voicings and stuff when they were writing. So what you want to do when you look at a song, basically you can break down any song into four basic parts, okay? And this is kind of like, if you listen to like a lot of NES music, you can kind of break it down that way. You got your percussion part, so like your drums, and you got like your bass line, and then you have your accompaniment, and then you have your lead, okay? So your percussion is gonna kind of like do some timekeeping, okay? And sort of establish rhythmically what's happening. Bass line is gonna do that as well, but it's also going to sort of establish your harmonic, what's happening harmonically, And then your accompaniment is going to provide context for your melody, which is happening in the lead. Okay, so this doesn't mean that every song only has four instruments: a drum, a bass, a piano, and a saxophone or whatever. But it means that every part in a song that you write is going to be playing one of these four basic parts. Okay, so when you listen to music, you want this is some homework. All right. When you go back, you go to like one of these concerts that's happening at MAG right now, and you go and you watch these guys playing. Listen to what the one guy is playing. Isolate in your head. That guy, the bass line is playing this. Okay, I see what he's doing. He's setting it up. He's laying down this foundation. That keyboard player is playing this stuff. He's sort of like adding like this, rhythm, some rhythm. The drummer is doing something very specific, and he's establishing this beat, and then the singer or the guitar player he's playing this melody, and I really understand what's happening in the melody because of all this other stuff. So start separating stuff. When you guys go out to these concerts, listen, try to listen critically. Real quick, you wanted to add something?
Cool.
You said. Say that again. You're a music teacher?
So I actually am a part-time music teacher, and when I'm helping students to pick out their clarinet part or whatever it happens to be in that particular piece, one of the things that helps them is not all speakers are created equal. Not all sound systems sound the same. There's a very different voice and timbre to each one, and you may have an easier time picking out that particular line or that particular part if you listen to it on more than one system. I've personally experienced that many times.
Yeah, no. I think we call that car checking.
Yeah, car
well,
check.
yeah, that's the idea, like to listen to your final mix on a car stereo because
Yeah.
they're sort of like the lowest level, common denominator.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what. Where did Marty McFly go? Did he go back in time?
He sat down.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, getting back to his question, actually, because there are arrangers who will start to answer his question with sheet music. I
Yeah.
mean, it is a valid approach.
Yeah.
It's just not, I think, the most common approach. I think the most common approach is probably Shark's going by ear. In other words, if you're writing an arrangement of a piece, you've probably, hopefully, been inspired. Meaning you know the source tune, you've heard it several times, and you have an idea in your mind of how it might go differently. It's kind of like you watch a movie and you have an idea of how the ending might have gone differently. It's the same concept.
Just for the sake of time, to round it out, listening by ear and learning how to listen to things by ear and interpret and figure it out on your own, it teaches you how to figure out what sounds good, what composers and arrangers think sounds good, what parts go together.
Yeah.
So doing that is a lot more useful than just mimicking what you see.
Thanks, teacher. Thanks, teach.
Again,
Senpai.
and again, because
Sensei.
I've said this
Sensei.
before.
Can we?
No, I've said this before constantly. The more it comes with practice, the more you end up doing it, the more you realize you're applying theory without knowing theory.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right.
Next question.
Are we ready to listen?
Are we ready?
Are we ready to check in, or
Andy?
do we want to one more? All right.
All right, so this is more on like programming and music sampling. What has been, Andrew's busy right now, I know Impact Sound works, but what's been the hardest? You said you program? I don't know if you do.
Nabil also works for ISW. He might be able to
might be
answer
able to
your
answer
question. Yeah.
What's been like one of the hardest instruments to get down for like a library?
The hardest instrument we've done for a sample library?
Yeah.
I'd say probably our most challenging and most successful libraries are our Shreddage libraries, the Shreddage 2 series, because they required very complicated engines. They do a lot of emulation of guitar performance. For instance, when you play a guitar line, you're playing it obviously across different strings, and the way you play it, it has to fit in your hand and it has to naturally go from one string to another. And there are multiple ways you can play the same line on a guitar. So what the algorithm inside Shreddage does is it sort of, you set like a hand size and it sort of figures out how would a guitar player play this, and then it plays those specific frets on those specific strings. And that's probably the most challenging and successful sample library aspect we've worked on.
I can add to this a little bit. I mean, obviously Nabil has more hands-on experience, but I've been reading like Keyboard Magazine for years, and I geek out on the programming side of things too. So if you tend to think mathematically and you tend to think of think as a programmer when you think of sound and you think of the full range of capabilities for any given instrument, you also tend to think of the interface by which humans interact with their instruments. And guitar is actually pretty complicated because when you're strumming an individual fret, string, there's a physical model there too, right? But if you how does a guitar work?
There's
right?
strings, Dave.
There's strings. Yeah, it's a string model. So physical modeling actually can do a string model relatively well. And if you think of the number of variables involved in just strumming a string, there's a large number, but if you think of the control that a guitarist has over that sound, it's substantial, but, apologies to guitarists, compared to the embouchure of a trumpet player and what a trumpet player can do with a mouthpiece, it's actually probably a subset of that. I mean, it's a different type of physical model. The interaction of a human mouth and a windpipe and an embouchure and a trumpet mouthpiece.
What is embouchure?
Embouchure, it's how you form your lips when you're blowing through a trumpet.
Yeah, no, that's true. Embouchure.
If you want to reduce the physical world into math and ask about what the most difficult instruments are to capture in their full breath, the ultimate answer would be the human voice. I mean, you've got Vocaloid and you've got Hatsune Miku, but it's not great. And you think of like what like the three tenors can do, and it's it's on a different level. But even trumpet, I would say, is like one level more complex than guitar, which is one level more complex or several levels more complex than say piano, which gets complex especially because of the polyphony and the notes interacting with one another. But it's very interesting if you are like math-minded, science-minded, programming-minded, to think about how instruments can be reduced into the physical world.
So this kind of is getting away from what we're talking about with you, but it kind of goes into composition. So when you're writing, let's say you're writing like a trumpet part in your remix, and you have a trumpet sample library, you have to be aware of the physical limitations of a trumpet player.
Correct.
Otherwise, you are going to end up with a trumpet line that sounds wildly inaccurate.
Like a piano, for example. Like a trumpet player can play at best two notes at the same time.
Yeah, if they're doing some really crazy multiphonics.
If they're doing crazy shit.
Multiphonics, which is very difficult to do. As a former trumpet player, this is very difficult to do, especially on a brass instrument. But you have to be aware of the physical limitations of what a trumpet player can do. A trumpet player cannot jump 3 octaves within the span of a 16th note run. I mean, it's just really, like, maybe there's like some guy in some like DCI drum corps or somewhere that can do it. But generally speaking, most trumpet players cannot do that.
That's another part of critical listening, though. As you listen to music, if you can, you start noticing the way certain instrument parts are written.
So you have to be aware of it.
Noticing like how a trumpet part works.
Exactly.
I hate to say this, but we can't be here all night. So
let's move on.
Did that answer your
Good question, though.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you very much.
Hang on a second. Wait. Can we check in or? Almost, okay.
All right, I don't know this guy.
Who's this guy?
All right. Anyways, I've got a more specific and kind of technical question. So I'm trying to do some EDM music, and I'm working on a filter sweep for a transition. I know it's an automated EQ, probably a cut in most cases from what I can hear. But I've noticed that just going straight up the frequency. Yeah, going just straight up, it sounds close, but it's not quite right. And what I'm looking for is a sound that it sounds like it's going through the ringer, where you get the really narrow band. So is there like a sweet spot where it it's a high cut plus a low cut and it meets at a certain frequency?
You might want to.
Andy is the best person to answer that question. Nabil is probably second best. It might be a difference between the type of filter that you're applying.
Okay.
Filter sweeps, Andy.
Okay.
I need that filter sweep.
So you said you wanted like a high pass and a low pass combined?
Well, I'm wondering. The sound I'm going for is something where, like in certain EDM tracks, where right before a huge drop, there's a big filter that it sounds like it's going through the ringer. Is that? And so I know there's not the whoosh, but more like where it's just
You don't know what it is, right?
Yeah, well, I know what it sounds like, and I mean, it's
usually there's a high pass,
High pass.
where they sweep the cutoff up with resonance, and then the other thing is sometimes there's like ring modulation.
Sure. Okay.
That I've heard that effect.
And then you do that on like the master.
The whole
track? Probably on the master, but just briefly. Like if you do it with the high pass, just for like a split second, then it's not processing every frequency. It's just processing whatever got high pass.
Sure. Okay.
I've heard that kind of thing before.
Yeah, I'm talking probably like a 1 or 2 beat, like.
Yeah.
If you keep your resonance a little higher, it sounds more focused. If you have your resonance lower or even, it won't sound like a sweep.
Okay.
So if you want a sweep, you want to get your resonance, your Q up.
And you'd also just automate the resonance?
No, you want to keep it high, basically. Okay. So if you look at a filter curve, you'll have that spike where the cutoff is.
Yes.
You want that spike to be relatively high, so that when you sweep, it's got that band that's going back and forth.
Understood. Cool.
What are filters?
That is
Yeah.
probably the most technical question we will get tonight.
Yeah, that's definitely the most.
We welcome technical questions.
Seriously,
Right.
thank you very much.
Thanks,
That's an
Andrew.
awesome question. All right, next.
Next question.
Okay, so I'm trying to write a symphony at my house, and I'm definitely having issues with chord structures specifically. I know that there's a lot of different inversions that you can do with chords, but there's also like getting rid of notes, essentially, like getting rid of the third or the fifth or seventh or whatever you're trying to do. How would you figure out whether you're doing just first and third or first and fifth, or just different inversions to have different build-ups to moments in the song?
I've got a really easy answer, and then I'll let someone who knows more than I do answer. My answer would be trial and error. Sorry, Shark.
Man, Nabil?
What is the question? I'm sorry.
How do you determine voicing?
He's talking about voicing
Chords.
and inversions and.
How do you determine voicing for a chord or for an ensemble? Like, can you give
In
a
the context
specific
of an arrangement.
In general.
Let him say it again real quick.
I'm writing like a 100-piece symphony, like you would
Okay.
for like the New York Philharmonic or something like that.
All right, so basically, you want to have obviously your top, your soprano, and that's being controlled by your top orchestra voices, which is your flutes, your violins, your trumpets, maybe doubled with things like clarinets or whatever. Basically, what you want is to have a thick sound in a big symphony. A lot of people, when they first start writing orchestral music and don't have a background in it, they make a mistake of putting the same notes on a bunch of sections and mistaking that for a thick sound. What you really want with a thick sound is a lot of different notes across your spectrum. So you have your bass voices, which are your tubas, your horns, your cellos. You want your mid-range voices like your clarinets and your trombones. And you want to have independent lines because independent lines will create density. And are you familiar with things like counterpoint? So basically you want to employ counterpoint. I would say at least for a thick sound that sounds really good in an orchestra, at least 4 or 5 independent lines operating in your chord progressions. And you want to have a lot of contrary motion so that you can clearly hear the whole spectrum playing independent voices rather than every single section playing the same thing. And that will create density and movement.
That's a little bit better than trial and error.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude,
Okay.
that was a great question.
You can talk to Nabil later more about that stuff if you want.
I actually love doing that kind of stuff, so please come up and ask if you have more questions.
All right, are we ready to do a check-in?
Can we check in? All right, let's check in with Andy and Nabil.
All right.
What do we got, guys?
I recorded that in the wrong pattern.
So to remind us, we are remixing Super Metroid as a jazz.
Okay.
I forgot what song we were remixing.
Brinstar.
Brinstar, lower Brinstar.
Okay, all right.
Samus.
Oh, that high end.
So, yeah, sorry, the high end is just the speakers.
It's the speakers.
All right, so that's where we're at now.
Is that
Nice.
a jazz guitar lead?
Yeah.
Nice.
That is our library arch top. It's very good.
So.
All right, just a reminder, we have like a little bit more than 20 minutes left, and there's still merch back there if anybody's interested in getting it.
Yeah.
Dia made me do this.
Okay, buy some merch. So what did you guys do?
Okay, well here, so you did something with the groove after.
So the first thing I wanted to do is, because we had that intro set up that Andy wanted to get into my thing that I had initially the idea for. So what he did was I went from his thing into the thing that I had an idea for, which was the groove kicked up, the bass line had more movement in it, it had basically more notes over time.
Yeah, here's the first bass line when it first comes in. And then here's afterwards, more like a walking bass almost. So, more notes, it helps increase the energy.
It creates
'cause there's
movement,
more notes
right.
happening. And then you also, with the drums too, we went from more simple drum pattern like.
Play the right one too.
Yeah.
You had it in two patterns.
And there was a ride. Yeah, sorry, I have that in two patterns. And then that became. So just building it up, right? That was the idea. Give it more motion and energy. Also, we're not, because we're doing this fast, normally I think more time would go into humanizing everything, but also because
Sure.
you can't really hear half
Especially
of it.
for jazz.
We're focusing a little more on arrangement, sort
Also,
of.
there's some weird like slapback echo between
Yeah,
the
the echo's
speakers.
not
That
good.
rim shot is like.
Yeah, it's.
So two
Yeah.
other things that were going on. One was that, so we had this, so there's an electric piano that got added here. So this was like a reference to the source. Let me go back here. And then it goes into the chords sort of for the next part. And then later on, then it becomes, this is like an arpeggio it's playing the notes, but it's playing like a whole bunch of other notes too at the same time. Because jazz, you know.
It's the easiest way to describe
Because
it.
jazz.
So, just say what you played before that sounded like Brinstar. What you played after only kind of sounded like Brinstar. That's what you call arranging.
Right.
Sure.
And then finally, so what I thought would sound cool is we have the rhythm built up and everything, the groove, but then cutting out, I muted some of the elements here that we put in. So just kind of keeping the high end, taking the bass out, and it sounds better on headphones. But a couple things with sequencing, some people ask a lot about how do you get, that's something people get rejected for a lot is, instruments that sound unrealistic. So just as an example with this guitar, the samples are good, since, we sell them.
Of course.
Buy our samples.
But there's also some stuff going on. The notes aren't hitting exactly on the beat. That's one thing. Another thing is that there's vibrato on the held notes. The guitarist would naturally add some, so that's getting faded in.
There's a grace note sort of thing going on.
So let me just play like one note, for example. It's kind of like a subtle, but you can hear it waver in pitch a little bit.
So
And
also
then without it, it's this. Static, no movement.
It's not as good.
real quick, you've got this note right here, this grace note, and that's a big thing because that's not how it is. That's not his, it's the melody in the
Right.
main. So
It's just a little extra.
That's arrangement.
That's
That's actually one of the key ingredients to sequencing guitar lines is to have
Grace
that
notes.
little extra grace note in the
Grace
beginning,
notes.
the
Yeah.
slide up.
If you watch Law and Order, the Law and Order theme song, like do do
Yeah.
it's like the classic guitar
So-
grace note, you know.
So you see what's happening here. We'll get to that in just one second. What's happening here is he's not just writing the notes, he's creating a performance. You see what's happening? So that's very important. When you're sequencing in a DAW, you're creating a performance. You're not just writing what the music is going to be. You're performing it.
If there were a human playing the parts, playing an actual guitar, they wouldn't just play doot 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 doot. They do the vibrato.
There's
they do the
there's an expressiveness that
whammy
instrument.
bar on the guitar. Yeah, all of it.
Yeah,
Yes.
humanization. Okay, Evan, what you got?
All right, hello, strangers.
Hello.
We've talked a lot about getting the right notes, getting a lot of the right instruments for those notes.
Sure.
But then we get to mixing and mastering.
Yeah.
And I see a mixing board and I'm lost. So how do you sort of understand the basics of mixing and mastering? And this might be sort of unrelated, but also understanding how to use synthesizers, some of the more technical aspects of synthesizers.
Go into FL Studio, go to the effects rack. There's a thing called
Sound
Goodizer.
Goodizer.
Sound
There you
Goodizer. It's a
go.
single
Well-
knob, and you just turn it all the way up, and your music sounds really good.
Well, I mean, Andy just mentioned like a lot of people get rejected for unrealistic instrument parts. I don't know. That's maybe like 5 to 10%. What we see more of with mixing and mastering is something called mud. And it's when you have an arrangement that has a lot of parts going on with a lot of instruments that all occupy sort of the same part of the frequency spectrum, and you don't do anything to separate them. And there are multiple things that you can do to separate them. You can use EQ to cut the highs of one part that are sort of encroaching on another part. There's panning. Never forget panning. So many mixes like forget panning where everything's just dead center and it sucks.
I forget panning all the time.
Sometimes Shark forgets
What is panning?
Panning is, so stereo, right, left, right, and anywhere in between. So in the old days, you know, before stereo, everything was mono and everything just sat dead center. And it made things a lot easier, but if you tried to have a lot of parts going at the same time, it sounded like shite, right? Stereo allows you to have complexity going on where you separate parts by virtue of, okay, you've got a trumpet and you've got a trombone, and maybe the trombone's playing a high part, the trumpet's playing a low part, so they kind of overlap, but the trumpet's over here on the left and the trombone's over here on the right.
Right.
So they're distinct.
Right. Perfect example is if you listen to rock and you hear rhythm guitars and they sound like they're not coming from the center, but they're coming from the left and right
Yeah.
speakers. That is called stereo panning, where they've recorded two different tracks
Sure.
differently, and it sounds like it's from the side, so it doesn't encroach on the center of the
That
mix.
could be doubling. That could be doubling
It
too,
could be
which
doubling,
is a
yeah.
separate concept. But
Right.
generally speaking, unless you're writing music in the 60s, which they did some crazy stuff back then, right? Your bass is probably going to be somewhat center in terms of stereo. It's very unusual to listen to a track where the bass part is panned hard left or hard right. It sounds really weird. It can almost make you sick. Drums, similar concept with the kick. Usually the kick is usually somewhere close to center. A kick panned hard left, hard right, very strange. Snare, a little less true. But then you get to the hi-hats, and again, this is critical listening, right? Listen to a track. Listen to each part of the drum track, not just the drum track. Listen to the hi-hats, listen to the snare, listen to the kick. The kick and the snare will almost usually be like somewhere close to center. The hi-hats might be out on either end, they might be center, they vary a bit more. So you'll start to pick up on patterns when it comes to panning and EQ and all these other things, kind of the same way you'll pick up on patterns with regard to the rhythms and the notes. And it's listening again critically and going by design and pattern.
Tosser wants to add something real quick. You want to?
So talking about panning and percussion, where you can really hear it, and where I think it's really important in any track you hear, the toms are almost always panned. Doom, 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 doom.
Yeah, doom, doom, doom.
Yeah,
The
so
pitches
when you hear
descend
like a
with the
tom
hand.
roll, doom, 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 doom,
Yeah.
it's going from left to right.
The
or from
famous
right
example
to right
being
to
Mike
left.
Tyson in The Hangover doing the tom fill from In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just like if you're looking for an example to listen to and hear what we're talking about, listen for the toms in pretty much anything that has a tom roll.
And
you'll
part
hear
of the
it
reason they're
moving.
panned that way also is just because that's how they're laid out. So you want the visual to match with the audio to some extent.
Yeah.
one more, just a warning for people who are new to mixing and who never had to work with mono equipment in their lives. Please don't forget to sometimes mix in mono, because stereo works beautifully, but there are sounds that might cancel each other out if they ever had to be played back on a mono system.
Phase cancellation.
This is-
I don't-
but
yeah,
listen, when
yeah.
I did the Maverick Rising trailer and we posted it up the first time accidentally in
mono?
mono, we found out how some of the songs parts got lost.
I just want to mention something real quick. I mentioned that I forget to do stuff in stereo sometimes. Part of that is because I have a friend who is deaf in one ear, and she only has hearing in her left ear. So if I do a lot of stereo, she can't really listen to my music. So
Interesting.
yeah.
All right, good question.
Okay, as I'm going to preface this, I'm sorry if this question's a bit vague, but can you, I've been teaching myself how to use FL Studio for like the past year and a half, but the one thing I can't wrap my head around, even though I looked up tutorials and stuff, is the synths. Like, I saw that he had Citrus up there for a second. What synths plugins do you usually use in FL Studio? And could you maybe like give a brief overview of like what I should even start to look at in synths? Because there's so many options in there that I don't know what to start
Okay.
to fix.
Okay.
So Andy does a lot of EDM, so maybe he can.
automation at the same time.
Yeah, like what style are you going for?
Yeah, what style?
Just any style in general, because synths can be used for like so many things. But like I'm basically sticking to sample libraries because I can't figure out how to use synths. So I'm just sticking to the orchestral stuff for now.
Probably, if you can afford it, probably one of the best recommendations I could give you is Omnisphere. It's expensive. It's $400 or $500.
It is $500.
I'll preface this, but it has over 8,000 sounds. It's all kinds of sounds. It has tons of synths. It has some acoustic instruments. It's got all sorts of bizarre, like ethnic sounds, guitars. And the cool thing about it is that all the sounds have like easy tweaking. So there's just like a button that basically says, make this sound different. And you don't need to touch anything else if you don't want to. You can. That's something that's expensive, but it's really good.
It's one of the most versatile synths.
So there are two schools of thought when it comes to synthesizers, I think, and plugins. And one is essentially that you should always make your own sounds, and you load up a synth, and you should tweak it and make it your own. And if you use a preset, you're a bad person, and you're probably going to hell.
Boo.
I don't subscribe to that. I think it's perfectly fine to use presets. They're there for a reason. Sometimes it's nice to tweak them a little bit and personalize them a little bit just to match your song, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The preset libraries are there for a reason. If something sounds good to you, roll with it. That's my way of thinking, and that's probably most people.
Synthesis is a really huge topic, you know, but there's...
Jake Kaufman did an entire panel on FM synthesis at like MAGFest 6 or something.
So there's like resources that you can look online just to like introduction to just regular like...
There's actually a new program. It's called Syntorial. It basically turns learning synthesis into a game where you have these levels where they give you a sound, and it starts real basic, and you have to tweak the parameters on the synthesizer to make the sound that they give you, and it gives you like a performance report, like you got it like 90% correct or whatever. And they start real basic with just like a square wave, right? Which octave, but then it puts in filters, and then it gets through like LFOs and the modulation and all this stuff. It's actually really good. I've tried it. It is a great way to learn how to use synthesizers, and the principles are pretty much the same across any synthesizer you use.
Yeah, there's a panel tomorrow on FM synthesis from 9 to 10 in the morning. If you want to get up at 9 in the morning. And I will say there's one other free VST synth that's worth doing because a lot of people have come up with presets for it.
Synth One.
Synth One is absolutely worth your time to learn and to get. You can get a ton of pre-made sounds, and maybe that'll make you good. If it's not good, there's a lot of tweaking you can do.
Yeah.
So
We could sit here and recommend plugins like till the cows come home.
We really can.
Zebra 2, I mean, Andy will vouch for Zebra 2. Sylenth 1 is very super popular, massive. Anything by Native Instruments is generally speaking probably pretty good.
I like to use Harmless in
Harmless is good.
FL Studio.
Serum is also good.
Yeah, Harmless is really nice in FL Studio.
Oh yeah,
So
Serum.
does that answer your question?
Serum is like the best synthesizer out right
But
now.
don't be afraid to use
Omnisphere.
presets because some presets are good.
All right. Like as an omnipresent. There you go. Thank you very much. Great question.
The game? It was called Syntorial, so it's S-Y-N and Tortorial, like tutorial, so
Nice.
Syntorial.
That sounds good.
Hey guys, so I'm going to play off of his question a little bit. Synthesis versus samples. I use Reason, so like we were kind of talking about before, Reason's kind of a closed environment. I know there are the sampling abilities there, like with I think it's Dr. Octorex,
NNXT, yeah.
NXT sampler, and then they have Recycler. And I've been kind of getting into those a little bit, but I primarily do a lot of sound design. So when I'm like listening to songs, I'm not necessarily listening to like the arrangement or anything, but I'm listening to how I can replicate that with the tools that I have within Reason. So that way, you know, whenever I have something in my head, I'm not really blocked by, okay, well, let me search the internet for this sample, or let me look in this long folder that I have. But I can kind of get it out, you know, as I want it. But I know there are a lot of people that aren't really for that. Like when I'm trying to look for, you know, tutorials on how to get specific sound, people are just saying, oh, well, just download this sample or do this, or start from a sample and then start tweaking it. And then I'm kind of lost at that step because I want to build it from, you know, scratch and kind of work with it so I can get it to where I want it to be. But
that's a tough
Paul Stretch.
It's kind of
Paul Stretch.
It's kind of a tough question because like for sample libraries and Reason, you've got NNXT and you've got the sample library that Reason ships with, and then you can get refills. And in fact, I'm going to pimp something for Andy here. Impact Soundworks actually releases some of their libraries as refills. So a lot of times with Reason, you can just download it. A lot of times you can start with the Reason factory library and maybe tweak it. The exception there being if it's a complex instrument, if it's an oboe and you're dealing with the NNXT oboe sound and you don't like it, you can tweak it, you can EQ it, you can add a filter, but if you don't like the way that the multi-sample itself is set up, meaning that you don't like how it transitions from soft to medium to loud, the amount of work that's going to be involved to fix that is monumental. And this is why for like, if you're doing really elaborate orchestral or jazz or something where you need a specific multi-sampled real-world instrument, Contact is really nice to have. And you know, I wish Propellerhead's Reason would have like a Contact rack would just make Reason like the perfect program. And I would probably switch to it. But in the absence of that, you're stuck with NNXT, and you can do a certain amount of work on a sample in NNXT and tweak it to where you want to get it, but there's a limit on that. That's the best answer I can provide, but Shark, do you want to add anything?
No, because I mostly use sample stuff,
Yeah,
so
that
I don't
really
build
covers
from
it.
scratch.
I think that covers it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sound design and Reason's a very fickle beast.
Yeah.
I mean, well, the synths are great.
No, they're great.
Thor is I wish I had Thor as a VST.
But-
I do.
Most of my synthesis happens on my iPad. So.
All right. Do you have any follow-up or are you good?
All right.
All right, cool. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And the last question of the night, after this, we'll listen to what the mix we have is. Maybe it'll be submitted to the site, maybe not.
No.
Hasn't happened yet.
Hey, man.
How's it going?
Good.
So my
Wait,
question.
who are you?
For those who don't know me, hi, I'm Jeffrey Tosser. I've
These
got
are-
a couple of mixes on the site. Actually, I think I've got like 12 or 13 or something like that now.
Thank you so much for doing me and Mario down by the schoolyard. I love that mix.
My
I feel
pleasure. I've been wanting to do that one forever.
So good.
What's your question?
But okay, so my question is, you know, about your English language is not working for me right now. ¿Hablas español? Anyway, my question is, you know, for the creative process of coming up with an arrangement. Earlier we talked about how, you know, basically you can break a track down into the percussion, the bass, the accompaniment, and the lead. I've found that I pretty much always start my creative process with the accompaniment, with the rhythm.
Right.
Is that
Right.
and from what I'm seeing you guys doing, it seems like you're doing the same thing. You're
Right.
starting with the rhythm, with the rhythmic elements, the percussion and the chords and that kind of thing. Is that sort of a universal thing that everybody does, or do you guys
Nothing's-
sometimes start with the leads, or sometimes start with the bass? Or
Nothing's
what?
universal when it comes to arranging. I mean, there's no. I don't think there's a. If anyone wants to get up here and say there's anything universal with regards to music, they're probably going to get shot down, right? Because music is just like.
Perhaps that wasn't the best way of phrasing it, but like, you know, do you find that you start with a particular part consistently?
When I come up with an idea for a remix, you know, I want to do like a remix a certain way. I'll think, you know, a lot of times I'll think about what am I going to change.
Yeah.
What am I going to change? I just finished this track for Final Fantasy V Part 2. I've been working on it for a really long time, and it's a remix of Fate in Haze from Final Fantasy V, which is the song that plays when you go into the first cave. You know, so it starts with that triplet arpeggio, that do 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 do, and then da 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 da. Like, so that's the song that I was remixing. That song is in a triplet feel. It's in 6/8 time. I said, okay, well, first thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to do it in 6/8 time. I'm going to change it. I'm going to do it in 4/4 with like a straight
Time
eighths
signature
kind of
change.
thing.
Yeah.
That's a time signature change. So that's me sitting down, deciding I'm going to change this part of it, and then see where that takes me. So seeing where an arrangement can take you is a big part of it, because I had very specific ideas about what I wanted to do with this remix. That's not the remix I ended up with.
I just want to clarify the question. Are you talking about you already have an idea for an arrangement and you're sitting down to actually construct it, or are you talking about trying to get an idea?
Coming up with the idea.
Coming up with the idea.
For me, the process
Okay.
always starts with arranging, or at least roughly sketching out the rhythm guitar part, and then
Interesting.
everything else builds out from there.
Yeah.
Do
Interesting.
you have something like that where you always start with the bass part and build from there, or always start with chords and build from there, or always start with percussion and build from there?
So like what I was saying is, what I'll do is sometimes I'll sing the melody, and I'll like think like, oh, what would this sound like as a rock thing, or what would this sound like as a jazz thing? Or
In that
what would
voice?
this-
Do you-
yeah,
do you think
exactly.
in that
That's my
voice?
internal.
Okay. Just checking.
What would this sound like as? So, what would this sound like in 3/4? How do I do this as a waltz? Someone posted on the forums, on OC Remix forums, in
Yeah.
the recruit and collaborate.
Oh, damn it, that's my idea.
He has an idea. He wants to do an album called Mega Man 3/4, which is Mega Man 3 songs done in
3/4 time.
3/4 time. So yeah.
Pretty cool.
Mega Man 3 and Mega Man 4 songs done in 3/4 time. That's what he wants.
I've got a super opinionated answer to your question, because I'm like I have a very, very strong opinion, like for my personal arrangement style, and that is, if I'm not going to change the melody for the arrangement, then I'm not doing the arrangement. Meaning, I am never going to start with anything other than the melody, because if I don't have an idea of how to change the melody in my mind for my style, I don't have an arrangement. Now, I have seen a lot of artists on OCR completely do things totally differently, where the melody is verbatim the same, and they have changed every other piece, and it sounds completely different and amazing. But for my personal style, it starts and ends with the melody, and I'll build something around that. But if I don't have an idea on how to change the melody, then I don't have an arrangement yet.
The answer is follow your heart.
The answer is always follow your heart.
I have
okay.
All right, and unfortunately, we have like a minute left. So
Yeah, we have no time.
Let's see what we got.
Guys,
Let's see what we have.
Can we see what you guys got with regards to Metroid?
Okay.
You guys
Okay.
excited to hear this?
Yeah.
Ye who are left.
Nobody's excited to hear.
Come on,
At least
Metroid
you.
Jazz. It's the final product. Let's give it up for Andy and Nabil. All right, it's going to be amazing. We're close. All right. Not bad.
Now,
So I'd ask
Not-
you what
not bad.
I'd ask you what you guys did, but we are like out of time.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's in this panel room after us, but we can
Right.
talk. If you guys have questions
Brett.
about it, we can talk about it. You know,
Right.
we'll be around. But that was pretty good.
Yeah,
Good
it was
job,
pretty
guys.
good. I-
Thank you, everybody, for asking all the questions.
Good questions.
I realize,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Thank you.
Realize it might have gotten a little technical for some people, and maybe not technical enough for other people. But we like to just answer questions. That's how we like doing
You
this.
can ask a lot
panel.
of these types of questions in our music composition and production
True.
forum.
Right.
Yeah, we have. So visit the OC Remix forums, ocremix.org. Go to the workshop, music composition and production. There's a forum there where you can ask all types of questions. Post your tracks up on the workshop. Get feedback. Lots of people want to hear your music. they don't even know it yet.
Right.
Okay?
One last thing is that the stuff that he did tonight within a time limit is very similar to stuff that goes on the website called Compos.
Yes.
If you're interested in learning how to produce under like a time pressure, these are perfect. They give you a finite time limit and source tracks to work with, and it teaches you how to produce very efficiently.
Yeah. A lot of competitions run a week long. Some of them are team based. There's also 1 hour compo that happens every Thursday night, I think, which is really, really good. So check that out. And thank you all for coming to our panel.
Thanks.